Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we have Nick Jushchyshyn from Drexel University, and he's going to be talking about motion capture, which Nick and I have done a fair bit of together sometimes. And so we'll be talking about that in the second hour. Also, a quick reminder that Ken Jordan is doing his web series right after the show, so stay tuned for that as well. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions for the first hour. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from Richard Lavery this morning in Belfast, Northern Ireland. He says, what are the panel's impressions of the new ATEM SDI models?
Go ahead, Danny.
Well, after looking at it, I'm very happy that finally we have more than 2 outputs. 4 outs, one for the multi-view, and the other 3 assignable outs. I think it's just nice for any house of worship.
And is that for the Extreme, right?
Yes, the Extreme ISO model.
So the Extreme ISO. So a little bit of background. These are new ATEM minis. They were released, I guess, overnight with no fanfare. They're just like, here they are. Now we have to kind of keep watching the website because it looks like Blackmagic will just sneak up on us with new products. And these are basically the same form factor on the front as the former ATEM minis, but they have SDI on the back. And not a lot of changes other than the HDMIs are changed out for SDIs, except for what Danny just outlined, which is that you have more 4 outputs instead of just 2, which is huge. I think that's probably the biggest upgrade in the whole process. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm very impressed with their ability to turn around product because just yesterday we were talking about, wouldn't it be better if these HDMI connectors, which are flimsy, were SDI? And lo and behold, the next day they came out the SDI. So we're making progress.
Go ahead, Jason.
Consider me enamored. I love buying ATEM minis. I'm less enamored with the prospect of having to figure out what to do with the old ones, but I always manage to find a way to do something with them. So I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Just, again, the price point, that is the same, but it's real connectors. The HDMI is so flimsy. I'm very excited that they're finally available, but I also notice in their website, of course, they're tying it into their cameras. Duh. And I'm wondering what it does limit you, or you have to get the converter if you're using your old set of cameras that are only HDMI out. So I think it's awesome, but finally a real professional camera. I mean,
for a lot of us, we started with all the SDI cameras, and so we have lots of cameras that the Blackmagic can talk to. Not the 12K, not that I'm bitter. It can talk to the 12K, but it can't shade it, and so it can only affect the lenses. But I think that. One of the other things about this is the power of being able to do a sub switch. So you have a bigger, say your Constellation is doing a big switch and doing all these things for a main show. It's easy now to route out. This is one of the things we wanted to use our little ATEMs for, is to route out and create a sub show that might be only the web show or something else that's more simple. And there was no good way to do that right until today. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, and of course, the interesting thing to me about the SDI Extreme ISO is that they're marketing it for virtual production. There's 4 independent keyers, and they're talking about the keying algorithm or system being new and different from previous ATEM minis. I don't know if that's a software upgrade, if the new, older ATEM minis will automatically get that new keyer, but it's really interesting that here's this $1,500 unit with 8 SDI inputs, 4 SDI outputs, and 4 independent keyers. So you can feed it 4 cameras, all with green screen, have 4 independent virtual backdrops, even tracked camera backdrops for outputs from computers. Of course, Unreal Engine has compatibility with Blackmagic Decklink boards, so you can get an output that's synchronized. And so that's really interesting that this small little.
So theoretically, with the 8 inputs, that means you could do key fill for each.
Exactly. So 4 cameras, each would have their own keyer, each would have their own virtual live backdrop feed. So you could integrate for esports or other informational broadcasts. You can integrate live data feeds and have live interaction, all with this little ATEM Mini Extreme form factor at $1,500 is pretty nice.
Yeah. They're getting pretty aggressive about the gaming area. It's really interesting. Mitchell?
They solve a problem I have currently with HyperDeck in that you have two separate converted SDI to HDMI to go into two channels to get the alpha cutout. And now that it's all SDI, you can go directly from your HyperDeck into it, and there's probably not going to be the same shift in keying.
Yeah, in general, the key fill doesn't really work over HDMI very well. It's just not the way that the format is, the system is built. So I probably, if I had a handful of cameras, it would be tempting to switch, to convert to this and to have SDI inputs. It also just means, again, you can get a 20 by 20 router or a 12 by 12 router or other routers that are very, painful to get in HDMI and have them on SDI. So it's a pretty good setup. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes to us from Andy Carluccio in San Francisco, California. And Andy says, if you connect an Apple TV as an additional display to an M1 Mac, does it count toward the overall limit on external displays for that chip? Or is it an additional to the one or two external outputs? And if not, how many Apple TVs can be used at once?
Go ahead, Jason.
Sadly, Andy, the answer to your question is the limit is still 2, and at best what you can do is mirror one or the other of your 2. It doesn't increase anything.
But it is cool to use the Apple TVs.
It's way cool to use it, yes.
There we go. All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. And Andy says, which model ATEM SDI Mini can produce a 4-camera input super source?
Go ahead, Jason.
Only the highest level of the pack.
Yeah, the Extreme is the only one that can do the super source. It just takes more processing power. Next question.
Jens Olson in Sandpoint, Idaho is up next. My longtime desktop speakers, Swan M10s, died. It's time for a new pair. Suggestions?
Go, Jason.
My suggestion is a little bit over the top, but I think you should actually get a pair of studio monitors and get a real sound card output that'll give you XLR and output through that. I think that is far and away the best way to do it. And as far as which studio monitor, I don't know. I mean, go overboard.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Jens, if you buy a set of speakers that you want to have for the rest of your life that work great, Genelecs are good. You probably get like an 8010 or an 8020. You'll have it for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I got because I wanted to, build out a surround system were the JBL 305s. They're not the highest quality, but at $150 a unit, they're about the best I could, per speaker. I think that they're about the best I could get for about $150 each. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I actually downsized my speakers when I moved the last time. I had a set of Mackie 824s, and they were on my meter bridge, which means they were directly in front of me as near fields. And when I moved in this room, they were too big and they sounded a little tubby. So I actually switched to the same ones that Alex uses, the JBL
the 305s.
305s, thanks. Mm-hmm. And they were perfect. So sometimes it depends on the amount of space you have to fill and the geometry of putting them on a meter bridge. Sometimes the bigger, better speakers don't work as well as the small ones. Also, a lot of people, if you're doing a lot of music with low end, a sub and a couple of smaller high end and mid range drivers is a good combination. You don't have to put these huge speakers on your meter bridge.
Is tubby a technical term?
I've heard it used by musicians before. Yeah,
Alex, you stole my line.
Go ahead, John.
I don't have to raise my hand. That's what I was going to say.
I was like tubby.
It comes from putting your speaker in a wash tub. It has a sound.
All right, there we go. All right, next, and for our producers, we are cutting through these questions pretty quick, so you probably have some room if you want to throw some more in. Next question.
Jens Olson is up next from Sandpoint, Idaho. Does anyone have a nice under-desk mount for an ATEM Extreme ISO? MixFX and Stream Deck handles everything.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm not going to give you model numbers. I'm going to be more abstract than that. Get a 1RU under-desk mount it to the bottom of your desk, and then just get a pull-out drawer for the ATEM, and that will do you wonders forever.
Next question.
Next question comes from Adrian Albeck in Brisbane, Australia, the Olympic city. And he says, can someone explain all the field categories in Zoom OSC, such as target ID, gallery ID, index ID, and so forth?
Explain all of them. I'm trying to think of the best way to. I mean, all of these things are everything that is there has an ID that is. You have to have that so it knows where to go. So I don't know if we can go through each one of those and do it. But as far as this goes, it's really a matter of everything gets a number, and that number allows you to manipulate it. It allows you to look at it, request information from it. Send things to it. So those are the things that are, that those IDs provide for you. Go ahead, Jason.
I would add that Luminal's documentation, as Mickey pointed out in chat, is fantastic. It is really designed for humans to understand, not just read. So just go look.
Next question.
Chris Widener is up next from Lafayette, Indiana, and he says there seems to be a lot of NDI HX2 cameras coming out. Would you consider this high enough quality to use for streaming?
Go ahead, Guy.
Well, it certainly depends on the model. I mean, you can get a little C920 and call that good enough for live streaming. So it all depends on the look that you really want. The higher end cameras with the bigger sensors, of course, are going to look better. NDI HX2, now there's even 3, is just going to give you higher latency, and it's going to be more compressed. So you do have a decode at the other end to decode that compression algorithm. So I would take a look around at what's coming down the pike with the HX3 stuff before I invested in any HX2 stuff, or just go full NDI because of that lag. I'm really partial to the Panasonic Bird Dog JVC cameras. Those are all good ones. Lumens make some great ones as well.
I think the thing what I have with all of the NDI stuff is just really when you record ISOs, how important is the event? So if it's an event that you're just doing streaming for and live, it's probably fine. I think when you have lower quality transports and you don't have any way to record, the highest quality version, there just won't be a lot of color correction or anything else to do later. That may not be important, but it's just something to consider when you think about IP-based transport is that you're kind of giving up a lot of the post that you would normally get. We record stuff that is, at least 422, and usually, Apple ProRes HQ, which means we can go back and do re-edits and do a lot of other things with it that we couldn't normally do. I mean, we could do it, but we would have very little to work with if we were only doing IP transport. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. He says, Lumen's Vivix series, VYVX, if you're looking it up, offers SDI, IP, and ASI input and output. What is ASI and how is it used? And that's Advanced Switching Interconnect.
And Lumen is and that's Vivix. It's a Vivix is the transport. And this is one of the broadcast transports that used to be used a lot more than. I mean, it used to be kind of synonymous with passing video signals between a lot of networks and so on and so forth. It's not used as much, mostly because it's expensive. So Vivix was kind of basically somewhat pushed out by things like the Switch, which is, in my opinion, at least as good as Vivix, and much more flexible. And then LTN on the lower end. And so so LTN gives you kind of a over IP transport system. Vivix, or the Switch gives you a private fiber network that is probably similar to Vivix. The difference is that Vivix, number one, was expensive. Number two, made you book things and hold your booking. So if you booked it their whole model was to book it like a satellite. So if I booked 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, I had to pay for that whether I used it or not. With the Switch, was very flexible. You just turn it off anytime you want. And so those things were a lot easier to. It was just a lot more cost effective to use the Switch at that point, and a lot more flexible. And they really kind of got out ahead of most of that. As far as what ASI is it's asynchronous serial interface, and it's used to basically pass MPEG streams across. Now, what that really lets us do in real terms is we can set that compression and set all the data rates and so on and so forth in that ASI, and then pass it over something that does a network that doesn't even know what it is. So it doesn't have to protect for the video. A lot of times ASI are used to pack multiple video streams onto one SDI. So the serial interface, the SDI, just thinks it's passing regular video from one, through a switcher, but you can take like 8 eight's a lot, but you could take like 4 or 6 ASI streams, embed them into an SDI, and it'll still go through the switcher. And as long as you have an ASI encoder and an ASI decoder, when it comes out the other end, you can spit it back out to baseband. Now, you are compressing it to do that. We also use that for satellite in the same way. So basically, we wrap something in ASI and hand it to a SAT truck. The SAT truck doesn't have to have an encoder at that point. It just pushes it up, and it's in that format. And so there's a lot of different ways to use ASI to make that work. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Vivix is a cool service. I think it was started by a company called Williams, which was an oil company, and they decided to use all their oil pipeline right away to throw fiber between cities and states and areas, and they've got a lot of fibers, so it's a very robust network.
Yeah, and it was something that a lot of us used a decade ago. I just haven't seen it in production for a long time, mostly because their business model was really painful. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, what monitor top SDI cameras would work best with the ATEM SDI range?
Go ahead, Nick.
So it depends on also what you define as best, but I'm still using a lot of these Blackmagic Micro Studio cameras. So they're really small form factor, so you can mount them onto monitor brackets and such. The biggest drawback with these, by the way, is they're starving for light. They have a really small micro four thirds sensor. So I'm using one now, and I have something close to 1,000 watts of LED lights, like not the power consumption, but 100-watt equivalent. And there's at least 8 of those bulbs in here to light my green screen and light myself so that I have a reasonable exposure. But I mean, they're fantastic because they do have SDI in and out. So you can connect one of the outputs of your ATEM SDI Mini to an SDI distributor, and that can then have all of the commands coming from the ATEM Mini that do all the color grading and focus adjustments. And if it's mounted on a PTZ head for pan tilt zoom, there's actually a cable that connects to the camera so that, again, the communications all come through the SDI input from the ATEM Mini. And then this cable then can interface with the pan tilt zoom and other devices. There's quite a lot going on here. So not the most ideal camera in the world, but if you've got plenty of light to feed it, it's really powerful for its size and price. So that would be my thought on that.
Yeah, I think for the those are some. There's a lot of small ones. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused as to what he means monitor top. Does he mean built-in monitor on the top?
I just think it's just SDI cameras that would sit right over top of the ATEM, or over top of the monitor.
So, the studio line would be nice, but the sensors are a little bit smaller. So the Ursa Broadcast with the larger sensor would be my pick, and especially with a nice piece of glass like a Fujinon 20-120 Cabrio. So if we're talking best, I'd get something with lens controls. The nice thing about the ATEM infrastructure, of course, is that you could paint the camera, because in the traditional world, if we're using something like a Grass Valley, we're going to have paint boxes, and now we're into a whole other ecosystem where we're talking, big bucks. So best, it's all relative as to how much money you want to spend.
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about best, you should think about an Arri LF, with an Angenieux 25 to 250. I think that those are, I think that those we can really stretch this out a little bit.
I always put those right on top of my my monitor.
Yeah,
my
exactly.
Ergotron loves those. Oh yeah,
It's so great to have. We're so great to be using an Arri as a web camera. Just for a day, I think I need to do that. Go ahead, Bill.
Might be misinterpreting, but I think he's looking for something like a Brio that literally has a plastic case that you can clip on right at the top of
Well, but I think that
screen.
but I think that we're talking. He's asking for SDI cameras, so we were being a little absurd. He says SDI cameras here for the SDI, so it's not necessarily a Brio, but something small.
Bringing up the question though, is the SDI protocol so different that you couldn't make a camera in that little lightweight form factor? I wonder what the chipset or whatever it is that makes
there's
it
lots
SDI.
of little cameras that So there's Marshall makes little. So Marshall makes lots of little cameras that have little SDI sticking out the back.
Yeah,
in fact,
there you go.
I think some of them get small enough that they have to use the micro.
They
What are you using there,
maddeningly small.
Guy? What do you got there?
Yeah, how about this one? It's got a monitor on the top. It's a red Komodo with 24 to 70 SDI out with the SDI transmitter. How about that? That
What's
SDI
the resolution
out
on that Komodo?
6K and
6K.
the 4K out SDI.
Yeah, there you go.
If I can also share, there's also a Panasonic. Is it Panasonic? It's the BGH1.
Mhm.
And you can do all of your remote control of that over Ethernet, and has an Ethernet jack. It can actually be powered PoE. So again, it's a small form factor camera with an SDI output. It wouldn't have the native camera control that you would have with a Blackmagic model, but it is another really nice camera, and it definitely has better light sensitivity than the Micro Studio.
And if you're looking for light sensitivity, you can go all the way with the Canon ME20. The ME20 is an SDI output, is a little box, and you don't even have to turn the lights on. So, I mean, literally, we did some tests with it. It's unbelievable.
2 million ISO.
Yeah, or 2 million? Is it only 2 million? I thought it was like
no, it's more than that.
Like 3.5 million ISO. And so what they did with it is they had they made it 1920 by 1080 at full frame, but they just put it into the pixels instead of making a higher resolution at full frame. They just made it 1920 by 1080. So the sensor sites are about, I think, 7 times bigger than the average sensor site so every pixel has tons of light that it gets to look at on the way in. And as a result, we've done stuff where we've shot, you can't see in front of the camera, and the camera sees everything just fine. So it's quite a thing. So if you're looking for something that you don't want to have a lot of lighting, or you really just want to focus on quality and not quantity, the ME20 is your okay. It's only $20,000. There's a smaller version that we used to own at Pixel Core, which was the ME200. And that one was, only went up to a couple 100,000 ISO, but it still did really, really well in low light. And this is, for the producers, this is what happens when we stop worrying about how long it takes us to answer these questions. If you don't ask enough questions, if we don't see enough stack, we're just going to kind of roam around and find answers along the path. All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, we talk about glass to the house, but would glass to the assisted living facility and a gigabit up-down per residence be game-changing for those with disabilities? I could see opportunities for employment, education, expression, and more.
Yeah, I think that getting glass to every single room would be a challenge, and most of these facilities have a lot of bandwidth going into them as they are, because of all the medical stuff that they're doing and everything else. It's just a matter of how they distribute it. And it does get way more complicated when you're talking about distributing it to every single room. Although I will say, for the amount that people are paying for that room, they should definitely get a 1 gig connection with it. So my grandmother was in an assisted living for 2 years, and when you saw the bills, you were like, this room should be much nicer. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, I think that would make a lot of sense. Next question.
David Brady in New York City says, on Mac, I use Magnet for window management. Are there any equal or comparable units for Windows? I just rescued a 3440 by 1440 curved monitor from a vacated cubicle, and that's a lot of real estate to deal with.
Go ahead, Jason.
It sure is. I wouldn't deal with third-party utilities. In fact, Paul Thurrott has a really great write-up on snap layouts, which is Windows 11. Windows 10, of course, with the Windows key and then arrows, you can basically go split screen right, split screen left, up to the corner, and you can do all of this just natively. Power Toys brand has a utility called Fancy Zones that is, again, Microsoft native, that was released as its own application that just goes seamlessly into Windows 10. So if that's what you've got, that's your solution. I put some links in Mukana for you.
I will say that I use Magnet a lot. That's like every day. So I don't know a PC version, but it's a great app. Next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware, here on the panel. Now that Netflix has announced reduced profits from a lower membership tiers or lower membership number, how do you think this will trickle into the production and streaming business?
Go ahead, Sky.
Alex and I both grew up in agricultural areas. And of course, every day you would get the profit or the cost of a bushel of wheat, or the profit that you'd get from, how much a pound of a pig would cost and things like that. So I think as Netflix creates a commodity, a thing that is going to be selling to the public, and now that the competition of the Paramount and Disney and Apple and all of the plus different resources. I think it's going to settle itself out. What you're probably going to see is some executives going to lose his job, and they're going to bring in some younger, enthusiastic, somebody's going to save the day hero. But what does that mean to us as the consumer? I think that we'll probably just have to, what we used to do is, buy one cable provider and get all of the different resources, different content pieces. We're going to now be spending, a lot on the same amount of money as a consumer, but from a dozen different locations.
Yeah, I think the big thing in this area, the big hubbub right now is a lot of the contracts are running out with the Writers Guild and with a lot of other ones. And so they're all starting to shake the tree again, trying to figure out what they're trying to figure out is how to go back into the past, which is hard. It's hard to go back to the past because it already happened. And they want to go back to the past where there was a residual system that worked really well for a lot of them. And if you were able to, get into that system where you're making 1% to 5% on the, whatever they call it, the major or whatever, the adjusted gross revenue.
The back end.
Anyway, so that they would, they would basically make a lot of money in the future. And there was a number. It was like 22 episodes across 5 seasons. And after that, it started to really turn out, for syndication. The problem really is that those don't exist anymore. People don't do 22 episodes, and they also don't do that many seasons, and they don't, there's a whole bunch of things that just aren't happening. The business model doesn't yield that. Also, the performance of any given piece is not important anymore. You're not trying to get ratings on a certain piece. You're just trying to get people to not drop their subscription. So it's an entirely different model. And the real question is whether that product made money or did it fit into that model, and what else are they watching? And, it's a very, very, it's a much more complex and diffuse thing. And it's going to be almost impossible to value the same way that it was valued. And the reality is, the good news is there's way more demand for content. The bad news is that each piece of that content is worth less. It really just isn't. Now, in the past, what studios forced, like when Netflix first started, I think that they had to pay something like 30-40% margin, like just 30-40% profit to the studio for the studio to be willing to work with Netflix. Those numbers are coming down because all the, because there's so much of it now, it's all starting to, lower. But they have, and if you're in a top billing, if you're Ryan Reynolds, they're just writing big fat checks. Like, there's no residual for Ryan Reynolds, but he's getting as much as he probably would have gotten on some films just up front because they're just going to pay him the check up ahead of time. And so that helps the actors, and that helps some of the big producers. It just doesn't help everybody else that was part of that ecosystem. So everybody else that was part of the ecosystem, the writers, and a lot of the folks that are what we call above the line. So there's above the line and below the line, and above the line are the creatives that they're writing it and they're designing it, and there's they get an above the line credit. Below the line, none of us got anything other than what we got. So we were like, whatever, So I haven't seen any checks from Star Wars, just in case you're wondering.
But you got your own action figure.
I do have my own action figure. So I got this is what benefit. I got out of this.
Side benefits. You get
exactly. There you go. But I'm not credited, and they can't find the behind the scenes photos at ILM. I asked them. I was like, so fine. Anyway, so those are the real issue here is that we're going to see this over the next year. It's a really good question because it's a preview of some drama that we're going to see over the next probably 18 months. Because all these contracts are going to get locked in, and everyone's trying to jockey for position, but there's really nowhere to go, And so, there is the old guard. They already made their money. The newer guard, which is really upset because they followed the old guard, expecting that they were going to get to do the same thing that the old guard did and live in Malibu. And then there's the new guard who already knows that's not going to happen. so there's, and they're not pushing that hard. They're like, how do I just get a lot more money up front? And so it's just a matter of, it's that middle guard of folks that are really trying to figure this out. and the chances of them figuring it out are very low. Go ahead, Mitchell.
A little background, if you check their filings when they made their announcement yesterday, excuse me, basically they lost over 1 million subscribers because they cracked down on the families that were sharing passwords so that, one family member may have the subscription and there may be 5 or 6 other hangers on. So they've eliminated all those. And I think they anticipated this being a problem. And you brought up some interesting points there, Sky and Alex, that this also may be a watershed for other things, whether it's a contract negotiation or the way this business works. Personally, I think there are way too many plus services out there that are streaming, and people are going to have to start making decisions. They're not going to be able to see every little show. I love the fact that Apple aggregates some of those programs, certainly makes it easier to find content. But wouldn't it be cool if Apple sort of stepped in and say, look, we're going to be the clearinghouse now. And instead of going with Disney Plus and Paramount Plus and HBO Max and all of those services, you'll be able to buy the show on an a la carte basis, because that's really the only reason I get Paramount Plus is for Star Wars and things like that.
Star Trek, you mean? Paramount Plus.
Oh, Star Trek. And then I go to Disney for Star Wars. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, and I think that a lot of the subscription services have, the ones that were late to the gate, I think are paying the price, because I know that I haven't done Paramount. Like I just was like, it got to it. I was like, I really like Star Trek, but I'm like, I just don't think I can put any more subscriptions on. I just can't add any more to what I'm already doing. And so I think that was where things kind of stopped. And I think that a lot of the new subscription services are now paying for that, because they just came out a little too late. And a lot of people got to that saturation moment, and they're looking at, cutting out, what am I going to turn off, and how do I turn that off, and how big, especially during all this inflation. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, and the question too kind of digs into how does this trickle into production and streaming business, and I think that a lot of what you were just talking about is that the production business seems to be pretty good right now, because Netflix is not the only game in town. It
would be really good. Here's the crazy thing: it would be really good business even if Netflix was the only game in town. I mean, they are they're in like 1,500 to 2,000 projects. I mean, it's just an insane number of things going on at one time.
You've got Disney producing its own lines of shows and with all of its IPs. On the production side, one of the other thing that I'm seeing happen also is the providers are doing more documentary work of behind the scenes of their own things. I mean, some of my favorite things to watch on Disney Plus is showing all the Imagineering work that went into engineering the rides experiences, the design thinking that went into them. Really some fascinating insights. And, you might have been on a ride and, on the Star Tours, and, you're drawn in by a tractor beam into this Star Destroyer. And then, the documentary is sharing that, the ride was on gas pistons, and, after so much, it would be down on the floor. So we needed to just lift it up again. And so we put that scene in. So on the production side, there is just tons and tons of more, new work being done. It's really fascinating.
Well, and what's interesting is that there is a lot more. We're starting to see more and more of the behind the scenes. It started off like a lot of us were like, why are they not doing tons and tons of behind the scenes? Because it just didn't seem to make any sense not to do it, because you've got all this free content. It's always amazing to me. And I think that this is a place that a lot of streamers are going to go in the same way that reality TV became something that was inexpensive. One thing that's really inexpensive for a film production is behind the scenes content, because it is, you're already spending millions of dollars, for that scene. Why not have an extra 2 or 3 camera operators capture some stuff and then cut it all together and put it up online? The real problem they've had so far, in my opinion, is it's not that it's underproduced, it's that it's overproduced. So, the Mandalorian stuff is a good example of, I would love to watch 8 hours or 10 hours of behind the scenes episodes for Mandalorian. I might even prefer to watch it over, at least Boba Fett. I'd prefer to watch the behind the scenes of Boba Fett, over actually watching the show. So I think that, and I think that this is going to, there's so much there when you do a production. And there's lots of people that love to watch that stuff and love to see those pieces. And it's a relatively inexpensive content per hour to produce, given that if you're already doing the movie, it's inexpensive to do the other part. And so I think that there's a lot more opportunity. We're going to see a little bit of this with the Star Wars stuff that's coming out on, I think, is it Friday? Or Saturday? I can't remember. It's
August, I think.
Is it August? I thought it was
early August.
I thought that for some reason I thought that Star Wars was the 24th of July. The new, the behind the scenes stuff, the 6 episode. Series.
I'm talking about a new series.
That's just going into old footage and grabbing it and putting it up. So, or it's the ILM Star Wars thing, I think. So we'll see. Go ahead, Bill.
So what's been interesting to me recently, I do have Paramount Plus, and I got there because of The Offer, which was the behind-the-scenes look at the making of The Godfather. They really did a brilliant job on that, and essentially it's a dramification documentary. I mean, it's a documentary of how it happened. They were involved with the actual producer and the people who made the movie, but they turned it into a truly compelling story using a lot of dramatic storytelling techniques that was great. And I was thinking, okay, so they had this one big tentpole thing. Am I gonna do? But it looks like they're going after more of that. I just saw the other day that they're doing a documentary about Don McLean's American Pie. And I was thinking about, why did they pick that? And they've got people like Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys and Garth Brooks who are interviewed in this. And I suddenly realized, this is a group, people who are interested in that look back at that era, who came of age in the 70s and 80s, and they realize there's a lot of disposable income then, and it's a pretty easy click to say, I'm going to go just for this kind of content.
And the mystery of American Pie is like right up there with JFK. I mean, so, I mean,
and even supposedly he's going to reveal every line by line what he was thinking of when he created it. And that's going to be, I think, compelling television.
I mean, to be honest with you, like who killed JFK? Where's Jimmy Hoffa? Don't really care. What American Pie? I'm super interested in knowing what that all meant.
If they do it as well as they did The Offer on The Godfather, it's going to be a great program. And I saw the trailer. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
I saw the trailer last night. It looks pretty good. I'm definitely going to watch it. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, again, the trailer is always going to take all the best bits because that's the trailer's job.
It's so rough, so jaded.
Well, I will just say the quality of production on The Offer was so high. The storytelling was so high because I'd watched just an episode or two. And then I said, Linda, my wife, you might like this. I can't tell you how much joy she got out of watching that making of The Godfather. And the story, whoever the creative team they have behind it, just knocked it out of the ballpark. It's such a fascinating story.
See, that's the carrot or the stick of a thing, isn't it? You're putting a big carrot out there for me, Bill. But I think
it pays off.
If we're looking at history, of course, Mr. Disney said, "Well, we made films, but I want to do a theme park." So I started pondering, what would a Netflix theme park look like? An Apple theme park look like?
I think we're past that.
You think? Okay.
Yeah, I think Disney. Well, I think it's. Yeah, I think Disney's cornered that.
But I also think you and Bill both have said, historically, economics, you would have a budget and you would have an envelope and you would put your entertainment dollars for every month, and at the end of the month, you'd be out of the dollars in that entertainment envelope. And I think it's starting to find its market saturation. So the entertainment business, they're still going to get your money. It's just now who's going to get it.
I think that also, I do think, and I don't know how the rest of the panel feels about this, but I do feel, like we're starting to stretch thin on creativity. Like I just like the Marvel stuff. I'm kind of like,
and that's where
I don't even at first. I mean, when Mandalorian came out, it was like a thing, and when there was a couple of these that were, like we really, as a family, we're really excited about looking at them. I don't even know which ones are coming out now. Like I've stopped paying attention because, and I think for us, the first one was Boba Fett was so slow that we were just like,
and my guess
this is hard.
Netflix is going to start getting into the live event concepts because that's the thing that you can't compete. You have the competition and it's not
Amazon's doing live concerts and Apple is streaming a country concert out of North Carolina on
there's your future.
Saturday night. I think it's Saturday the 24th. So yeah, I think we'll see more live. Absolutely.
Netflix theme park.
Yeah, Netflix there's not going to be a Netflix theme park. Like, I'm just telling you, I'm breaking it to you, Sky. I wouldn't hold your breath on that one. All right, next question.
Popsicles.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri moves us along with any keyboards that have Mac/Windows/Chrome functionality. Each OS has its own unique keys. If not, how about just a Mac/Windows keyboard?
I go ahead, Jason.
I'll make this easy for you. First, decide the one that you are natively on, because the real difference is the Windows key versus the Command key. And then just figure out how to adapt it. In Mac OS, you can basically say, I want the Command key to be the Option key. I want you to switch them so that your thumb doesn't get messed up. That is straight away the easiest way to do this. Having both functionalities doesn't really make sense when you really just want to be able to use the keyboard you like with both operating systems.
Yeah, for some reason I thought that Logitech had one that had like both keys on it, but I could be wrong. That went, but I think you're right, because it's really just barely different, between the two. But I always get ones for. I find that if I get a PC keyboard and I put it on my Mac, I just end up upset a lot. So, next question.
Next one comes to us from Isaac Lay in Dayton, Ohio. I'm a few minutes late, but have we talked about the new ATEM SDI announcement from Blackmagic Design?
Yes, you're going to have to rewind. We talked about it a lot. Sorry. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. I like the Marshall CV226 lipstick camera, and he's got a link there. But I'm curious what the green and red connectors are. What are they used for?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, you're probably not going to like the picture quality of something that small. I mean, once you see it, it looks impressive with how tiny it is if you have a specific purpose. But yeah, the green connector is going to be the RS485 control, and then the red's going to be the power. So you've got camera, and then there's actually an inline remote control, so you can access the on-screen display through that remote control, and you can set your brightness and lock in some of the image settings and zoom control and things like that. But yeah, it's a pretty neat camera for a specific like spy type purpose, but the image quality is not going to be as good as what you would get out of something else.
Yeah, I wouldn't normally use that as a webcam, but it is, it's great when we're trying to do some kind of crash cam. We want to stick it somewhere you can't put any other kind of camera, and you want to get a reasonably good quality. But exactly what Guy said is these aren't going to hold up to many other cameras that we're used to looking at. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the ones that I would be looking at in this same form factor with really good image quality that we've used to shoot a couple of the videos on our YouTube channel is the Ada line. So look up Ada Imaging and take a look at some of their smaller cameras. I don't have the model number off the top of my head, but
and this is for as a web camera, or is this as a?
Yeah, we've used it as both. So as a web camera, but it's that same small form factor, but it goes all the way up to 4K, and it's got a bigger sensor, so the look is way more impressive.
And how do you spell the Ada?
AIDA, and then imaging.com. Yeah, we hook those into the switchers.
Sorry, say that again?
We hook those into the switchers AR-SDI as well, 4K SDI.
Nice. And do they do outside it as well? Oh, these are, okay. There's a lot of different, yeah, it's cool. Next question.
Greg Gritchmeyer is up next from Topping, Virginia, and he asks, I'm looking to get into 3D printing. Does a library exist of thingies folks have built to help with our production work, holders, stands, and so forth?
Not only is it thingies, it's Thingiverse. So Thingiverse is a place where you can actually go and find thingies. So yeah, if you do a search for things like ATEM Mini Extreme ISO stand, you'll see 3D model or printable model. You'll end up at everything from Thingiverse to Sketchfab. Might have those kinds of things, and so there's a couple different groups of folks that are putting those together. And a lot of people are throwing up the STL files. They're throwing up the Blender files, the OBJs, all kinds of things. And so it's actually relatively easy to find a lot of these things now. And that's how I got started, printing some of the stuff for what I was doing. The thing that I found the most valuable for me was the switcher. Basically getting a 3D model of my switcher. That's what was valuable to me, because then I could model my own around it, and making sure that once I knew that the model that I had was at scale and had the right things, I could build very tight custom models for it. So that was the most important model to have, is not so much the ones that do things, but the ones that I could go up against it. And so that's something that hopefully we can find more of. Yeah, Nick, you were going to say something?
You covered literally everything that I was going to say. I mean, the only thing I could add to that is some other fun things to look at with 3D printing is using 3D prints as castings. You know, you really can go down a rabbit hole there where you get yourself a nice box of sand and you start melting aluminum cans. And there's a lot of things that are that this is a gateway to. Try a little bit. It'll make you feel good.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it out of aluminum cans or just go straight to gold. Sky?
I just started going down the Thingiverse rabbit hole. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Another thing to know is that the Smithsonian has a lot of, if you do 3D models, Smithsonian, a lot of cool models. They digitize their stuff all the time with photogrammetry. Now, not all of those models are watertight, but they're not that hard to correct for that. And then you can print little things out of the Smithsonian for your home.
I was going to say these days.
Go ahead. The thing. What's the filament though? Make sure to get the right filament. Is that the real trick?
Yeah, there's lots of different kinds of filaments. You can get ones that are more soft and rubbery and ones that are a lot stiffer. Nick, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that, again, with the prevalence of photogrammetry software, it's so easy to create models of things now. And it's really nice, when it comes gift giving time, it's neat that you can create some really personalized items. My son, one year, his grandmother liked going kayaking with their little Yorkie. And so he 3D printed like a Santa Claus in a kayak with a Yorkie on it, just by getting the individual models and just sticking them together and saying print. And there it was. So there is so much you can do. And again, with the prevalence of photogrammetry software, you can, create custom models of things that are around you. I'm actually hoping to make a snow globe for somebody based on a little retreat place that they have. And so I flew a drone around that. And so that...
is so cool. I just thought about, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to do that with my parents' house. Like, I just realized that like a 3D model of my parents' house as a snow globe for a Christmas gift.
Yeah. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, Amazon has these
I am going to be a
snow globe kits, and you can just print it in plastic and, get the tester's model paints, and you could paint it really nice. And it's just wonderful because it's like this little personalized thing. And so, I think 3D printing is definitely one of those.
I'm just about to go out to Pennsylvania and I'm going to take all the pictures I need. I'm going to take a drone out, take all the pictures I need. And that gives me a new thing to work on. Not like I need one more thing, but that would be an incredible Christmas gift. Oh, that's such a good idea.
Absolutely. Cool.
There you go. 3D printing. You can also get 3D printers for pancakes. Just in case you're wondering, you can print pancakes. It's pretty cool. I can't taste anything. So
I was going to say, how does DPU taste?
Yeah, right at this moment after COVID, doesn't matter to me. DPU and pancakes taste exactly the same. All right, next question.
Next question comes from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. He says, speaking of streaming entertainment, what shows have captured your imagination or at least attention lately?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was really getting into searching around Apple, and I found a series called The Old Man with Jeff Bridges. And it's so well done. But here's what's interesting about it is that Apple was offering it with a season pass. So I didn't have to sign up yet another streaming service, in this case, FX. I could just buy a pass for that series. And Apple kind of curates it. They say, hey, you got a new episode up today. And I go and watch it. So not only is it a well-written show, but it was fun to get to.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
All right. I'm going to start by saying I really like Westworld, and I'm still on the fence about the most recent season because every season it feels like I think to myself repeatedly over the course of the first few episodes, okay, now they're just getting too weird. They're meta-ing their meta again, and it's getting colossally too weird. And then somehow they manage to turn it out. So I'm hoping that the most recent season will follow suit. The setup's pretty cool.
Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, so for me, I became completely infatuated with this series on Netflix called Arcane. It's animated, and it's one of these where the first 2 episodes go fairly predictable. It's an animated show. It's a blend of 3D, 2D. The artwork is absolutely gorgeous. The first 2 episodes do this fantastic job of establishing the world, establishing the characters, the relationships, the conflicts, all of that really well done. And then the 3rd episode, basically after you've seen the first 2, whatever it is that you think is about to happen and whatever you think is happening next, it's all wrong. It's just, and that's one item. And the other item is you're just not prepared. And I shared it with my daughter, who's in her 20s, and she was watching with her husband. And one time I followed up a week or 2 later, like, have you been watching it? And she said, oh, we've watched 2 or 3. Like, you've watched 2, because if you've watched 3, you would know. So, and it's a total of 9 episodes. And so it's a great animated standalone series. It's like lots of good stuff.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I've always been a big admirer of the BBC's productions. I've ever since I watched those Sherlock Holmes with Jeremy Brett, I realized their back of house crew is just stunning. So on BBC America, which is another subscription that I maintain because I think that I learn a lot from it, I've been watching a thing called Silks, which has to do with barristers in England, and it's been really compelling. I've found myself hooked with it. And so I try to look at different production communities around the world and see what they're doing, and I've always admired the
Rumpole of the Bailey. So you got to look at Rumpole.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sky.
Classics.
I'd love to see a Master and Commander, but that's very expensive, putting things on ships and doing all of that. I just
did a movie. It almost killed him. It was really expensive.
Russell Crowe, yeah. I just watched it recently, and I had the 2 box set with the behind the scenes, as you were talking about behind the scenes. So yes, I'm kind of infatuated with the whole certain ones on Apple Plus. I hear Ted Lasso is coming out with a season 2. The whole social commentary of Loot, again, on Apple is, again, they're taking, just like they did with The Morning Show, Apple did with The Morning Show, they're taking the headlines and putting it into, quote, entertainment. But the best part, Schmigadoon coming, season 2.
I have to admit that we're still still watching old series because they're all done, and you can watch one every night, and it's as the family, like we usually like to sit down at the end of the day and just watch something, and so we're kind of in the middle of Alias. It got frozen because my son went to Pennsylvania for the summer, and so no one's allowed to watch it, and everyone's very upset that we can't go back to Alias because we were really enjoying we were really in the middle of it. Now it's going to have to go back like 2 episodes to catch up again. Before that it was Person of Interest, and before that I think it was Heroes, and it was just like we just kind of worked through a whole, all the seasons one at a time. And it's so much easier to, like, the problem is that when you get used to doing it that way, having a season go out is really painful, because now I have to wait a whole nother season, for it. Like we just watched, what was the one that I just watched? Terminal List. And I was like, the only problem with Terminal List is it was like 20 episodes too short.
I think it's fun that you gather your family around the campfire to do a thing together.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome.
I think post-COVID, I mean, our family was already pretty tight, and now it's just like we're just used to doing things as a group. Like we don't, and we've always been that way. Like the 4 of us are like a little clique. Go ahead, Mitchell. Yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think there's enough Sharknado movies you could get them together for the family.
Oof. I worked on one of those. No, thank you. All right, next question.
The next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. Would making mobile infrastructure a utility have the same societal benefits as making terrestrial internet infrastructure a utility?
No, because it'd be almost impossible to do. Like it would just be impossible to make that happen. And the main thing is that the terrestrial idea of glass to the house is something that is building on something we've already done before. Electricity to the house, phone to the house, plumbing to the house. We've done this to the house before. It's like, this is a model we know how to do, and we need to do that. The problem with mobile utility would be that it would involve too much of the telecommunications and all their nonsense. Next question.
Liberty White, Atlanta, Georgia. What does the panel think about the DJI Mini 3 Pro? It will be used mainly for establishing shots and possibly real estate content.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, if you're going to be using this stuff for commercial, you're really going to want to get a license. And while that's a fantastic camera and they're a lot of fun, and there is a learning curve. So by the time you learn it, get your license and all that, you may as well have just hired somebody with an even better camera to get the even better shots with the larger sensor, ProRes, and that kind of thing. So that'd be my recommendation, is just hire somebody for the times that you need it. And if you want a toy, that's a great toy, but I wouldn't use it for commercial.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could probably get away as establishing shots. I mean, we've used lower quality Mavics, to do that kind of thing in the past. So, I mean, I think that you could get away with, these for reality content. I mean, again, technically, if you're doing real estate content, you're supposed to be licensed. Could you get away with doing lots of shots of that? Probably. Like if you're not getting up into things and around things, you probably get away with it. If it's something that's more casual, as soon as it turns into a real business, you're going to want one of the larger DJIs, or you're going to want to get a license, and you're going to want to do a lot of other things. But I think that as a tip off into like, oh, I'm experimenting with this as part of a business, I think that the Mini is a great little thing that doesn't require a lot of doesn't require the licensing to get started, so you can play with it and see if that's something that you want to do. And I think it would. Again, I have a Mavic, the original Mavic. And this is going to be much higher quality than the Mavic I have now. And I shot some great stuff with it back when it was a little bit more, we could do a little bit more having fun. I'm looking at a new one. I'm probably looking at the Air. I'm probably going to get something just a little bit bigger. I want at least a 1-inch sensor. I mean, what I really want, of course, is the X7 with a Inspire and that kind of thing. But we'll hold back. And then probably just get an Air. The Air has the 1-inch sensor, and you can when it really, to me, the real step up is getting to 1-inch sensor, and the next step up is being able to get either DNEG or ProRes and being able to shoot and log and those kinds of things. But I think that for establishing shots, for real estate content, I think you could probably get away with a lot with that little Mavic to get started, and see if it's something that you want to turn into a business, and then just get a license and go through the trouble to make it happen. Next question.
Brody Brazil in San Francisco asked this: does anyone have experience using Sony camera bodies with Canon EF lenses in video situations? I'm considering moving to a Sony for my main home studio camera, but only have Canon glass for now. I guess Metabones adapters are the best option.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the beauty of the Sony system is that lens quickness with autofocus. So I would go all Sony glass. Your best bet is to go to a local camera shop and try out a couple lenses, see what you like. That's the benefit of having some of these bigger stores locally, and support your local retailer.
You go ahead, Jason.
Metabones. I tried so hard to like you. So hard. I did all the firmware. I followed all your directions, and I always returned you.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm sorry reacting to that. I agree with Guy. I think you can go with the Sony lenses because there's so much technology that the Sony camera body does talking to the lens. Here's an old, not old, but here's a ZV-E10 talking to a new power zoom 17-35 Sony lens. That autofocus, it just needs that fast servo in it, and now that it has the ability to do zooming. And what's cool about the lens is it doesn't extend in and out of the camera body. It stays in the same position. So don't discount the benefits of using the Sony product line. You can get them pretty cheap. Sometimes they're on sale at B&H. You can probably get into a good Sony lens, utility lens like that one for about $1,000.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, when we first started doing Hangouts, we moved to the Sony, what was it, the 700, the X700, FS700. And it was a Super 35 sensor with a Sony mount, and we put EF lenses on and just because we had tons of Canon glass, and that worked fine. It sometimes you have to reseat the EF lens to get it to really talk. So it was always like a little bit of a thing to get it going. Once it was connected, it was fine. it is, I do think that you're going to be better off with native lenses. But if you're trying to get something in between, the problem is that once you start going down the path, I mean, the Metabones adapters, I think, are between $350 and $550. And so you're getting close to a lens, just to convert it. But if you have a lot of glass already, I mean, it just depends on how much glass you have. If you have tons and tons of glass, it still might make sense to have the adapters. So I probably would try to do both, which is that if you decided you wanted to go to Sony camera bodies, then you might want to get an adapter so that any Canon lens is available to you. But you're probably going to be better off as you go to kind of backfill that with Sony lenses. I think everybody's suggestion on that makes sense. Next question.
Todd Reynolds, North Adams, Massachusetts. Hi, Todd. Asked this: Dropbox Replay, their new product for video editing collaboration. Anyone tried it?
Go ahead, Bill.
I haven't personally tried it, but I'm on a lot of professional editing groups, and the people who do say, I guess the general feeling I get from it is that it's the top of the class for that. I will say that almost everybody says it is not like sitting in front of an NLE, and the product is there to allow a remote editor to drive your machine remotely and get the editing experience that way. I'm pretty skeptical, although I haven't had my hands on it. When I'm editing, you do get kind of in the zone and you don't really think about what you're doing, and any little delays and it takes a little extra time to load this or that kind of interrupts your creative flow.
So this isn't like a Frame.io.
No, this is actually, I'm going to drive the editing system in Los Angeles from where I'm sitting in real time. That's what Replay, what people want to do with it.
That sounds painful.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of what I hear. But they do say that if you got to do that, if that's mission critical for you, that this is probably the best system out there right now. That's at least what I hear.
Got it. All right. We are changing subjects to our second hour. We've got Nick Jushchyshyn here from Drexel University. Hey, Nick.
Hello. How's it going?
Yeah, good. And I decided that, one of the things we're trying to do on Wednesdays, and I think that it's a little outside of a lot of folks' interest inside of office hours. It's really funny. Pixel Core was all visual effects and computer graphics, and leaned very little. It was hard to get to talk about video and audio with folks in Pixel Core because they were just interested in photogrammetry. And so the Wednesdays are really like the old Pixel Core days. Like this is all we talked about, we're through these things. And I think that for us to be well balanced is to understand how all of these different technologies work. So one day a week, we want to talk about these things because, they can affect, it's at least important to know how they work. And have an understanding of them so that if they come up in your production that you're more video or whatever, that you understand how they actually tie together and how they work. And so Nick and I have worked on motion capture together for over a decade here off and on. And so I thought it'd be great to have Nick come on and give us a little overview of motion capture and answer your questions about motion capture. So go take it away, Nick.
Great. All right. So I guess I have a little demo I can screen share. Let's see if I can get that going here. So what I have here is this is a Zoom meeting recording. So this was a remote mocap system session where the person who was it was directing and wanted the mocap data was connecting via Zoom. So this camera view, which you can't see my mouse. I always forget to turn on my mouse. Capture settings and mouse pointer. There we go. Okay. So this is what the mocap stage itself looks like. It's just a big open room. Our stage is 40 foot by 40 foot. A big chunk of it is taken up by the green screen psych so that we can do green screen work. But what might be a little difficult to see around the top here is that there are several cameras that are mounted in the ring around the ceiling. There's another one here. And then we also have 4 cameras that we bring out on kind of an on-demand to kind of rake the floor to make sure we get accuracy with foot motion and such. And so they're all operated by a single computer right here. So one of my students is over here operating the computer that's connected to these. And so this is an optical motion capture system. And I'm actually I'm actually the performer in this one. The in the middle sitting here.
And just to, because Nick, just before you go into that, Nick, I'll just show this real quickly. Just to give you kind of a wider view. This is the old motion capture system that we used to have in Pixel Core. If I click to this, I don't know how well you can see that, but you can see all of these.
It's not feeding. We still have Nick's feed.
Oh, there we go. So you have all these cameras.
There you go.
These are all different cameras that are, and this is obviously a 360 kind of or a panorama. So you're kind of going around the thing, but you'll see all these cameras there, and all those cameras build that grid. You can see them here as a kind of a shot of us setting them up, and so you can see these cameras, and these are Nick. You have Vicon, right? This is natural motion, and this is a close up of what one of those cameras actually looks like. So what you have here is
OptiTrack.
This is OptiTrack. And so these are the Prime 41s. And so basically this is what camera number, so we know what we're looking at. The camera here, and then these are infrared. So you won't see that, this outer light just tells us that it's on, but the inner light is an infrared that is pushing that out from the point of view of the camera. And that's how it sees those individual markers. But these are and that's the drink that I had after I finished. Sorry about that. I hit the next one. So boy, did I need it. Anyway, so anyway, go ahead, take it away, Nick.
Sure. So with an optical system, the cameras are pretty universally set up the way that Alex shared. So he was showing an OptiTrack camera. We use Vicons, and so the reason there's a big bright red light is these cameras that we're using on our floor have visible red light. There are lights that are infrared that are on the cameras that are around the perimeter of the room, and they're every bit as bright, but you can't see them because they're outside of the visual range of this camera. So there's that. Looks like I crashed my little demo program here. So this gives you kind of a sense of the layout. And what I was hoping to do with these is be able to show you the software for that as well. So let me just get rid of this little crash.
And while Nick's doing that, I'll show another photo, a photo of us working here. So this is what we call a T-pose. So here's one of our actors looking at that T-pose. Now what we were doing there is this has motion capture. You can see the reflectors are up here.
Again, we're still on Nick's screen. We're not seeing the feed.
I'll stop that. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
So you see these little reflectors here, and that's actually tracking the position of a virtual camera. So this rig, this is just a little camera rig, but what we did is we've just put a monitor on it, and then we have these markers here, and those allow us to orient where this camera is pointing in the space, and then you can see our actor here with all these markers that are there as far as that goes. And so that's one of the things that that's kind of how we track it. And then what will happen is in real time, we can actually see that character through the monitor. We can see the character moving in real time, which is kind of cool. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Nick.
and that was actually the next thing that I was going to show then is that the important thing to know about those markers is that they're retroreflective, right? So I actually think I have one here. So this is, you probably can't see it very well, but this is in front. If I put it in front of me, yeah. Well, anyway, they're sphere in shape, and they're coated with the same kind of material that you would see on a safety vest or running shoes that reflect headlights right back to cars. So those markers reflect the infrared light back to the cameras. So the cameras can be really tuned to just pick up those reflections. And in fact, in this screen, this is the Vicon Shogun software. If you look closely, like at this camera, you're actually able to see the cluster of markers, or little green dots, in that camera's view. And those will move as the performer moves. So this is a real-time view of the motion capture software. It's using all of the cameras, and you can kind of see how they work like a GPS system that, all right, this camera sees the markers from this angle and this camera sees them from the other angle. And so these effectively make, you could draw a line from the sensor straight through this panel and it would lead right to, a marker on my hand. And a similar line could run from this camera and this camera, et cetera. And that's how it triangulates the location of each marker. And so there's something like 80 markers typically on a person. So there's like 4 at the feet and 2 at each bending joints.
And you're more aggressive than we are. I think ours are typically like 50, 55, 56. That was the old Vicon. Sorry?
Okay. Yeah, they add up quick.
Yeah.
Like there's 5 just on the head, et cetera. But when you're running the software, all of these cameras are connected via power over Ethernet. So at that desk that I had pointed to earlier, there is a PoE networking switch that sends them power and connects them over high-speed Ethernet directly to the computer. And so the computer is then getting processed data. The cameras have their own onboard processing ability. And so they're ultimately transferring the XY positions of all the dots that they see. And then this software does what we call reconstructs the location of all of those dots. And then there is something called a range of motion. Let's see if I captured that here. We might not have started the Zoom session when I did the range of motion, but we usually start out doing a T pose and something else we call an A pose, right? So, if the arms are straight out, that's a T pose. And so this allows the system to calibrate. Okay, I understand what markers I'm looking for. I understand what the shape of a person is. And now I'm going to map the position of those markers onto this human character body. And then the system can record that data. And these are high-speed cameras as well. The newest line of Vicon cameras can do tens of thousands of frames a second. We typically run at 150 or 300 frames a second. So
now, why do you need the frame rate to be so much higher than the
it allows us to calculate for motion blur through frames. That gives us that fidelity. And I believe the software is also using that to reconstruct if a particular marker goes out of frame or just doesn't get picked up fully. It'll calculate a trajectory from when it disappeared and reappeared. In fact, there is one point, I think, in this capture session where I walked away outside of, we call this space that all the cameras can see, that's called the volume. And if I walk out of it, the character just stops moving and then it floats to the next position wherever I came back into the volume.
When we used to do it with the Vicon, for some reason, the way it cleaned up is that it would just crumple up it would just like as someone walked off the capture stage, the character would just go, and just like crumple up into a little ball waiting for them to come back. And then they came back and it would just reconstitute itself, as it came back out again. And a lot of the in-betweens here, of course, is calibrating all of those camera positions. And so there is a wand. Do you have any pictures of the wand?
I don't have any pictures handy, but basically it's a stick with a T shape. It looks like a T square, but it has LED lights on it.
And what we do is we call it wanding the room, and it's a dance. It's a dance. You swing around, you swing this wand. The wand is basically as Nick said, it's got basically, ours at least had 2 points like this, and it came out, or 3 points. And essentially what happened is it knew what the orientation of these points were and exactly the distance between them. And so by showing that to all the cameras, when you're in calibration mode, you swing that around and the cameras use that to figure out where they are. And so they'll constantly say, I see this, I see this, I see this, I see this. But it's this funny thing where you're swinging this thing around and it is kind of a dance that you do, on it. And if it's a big space, it takes a little while. It takes 15, 20 minutes for you to I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, but 5 or 10 minutes to wand the room and then let it calculate. And you're trying to make sure that all the cameras agree with each other, that this is where, where the other ones are, to get that math to work. And then where all the points are inside of them. But until the cameras have that, they don't know anything about where they are. They're like a regular camera, except until they've synced that up.
This is the same studio, but a different setup. So we were doing a virtual production setup where we were tracking just the camera through the space, and then Unreal Engine would manipulate the projection of the background to match, and you would get all of the parallax motion in this screen. So it's not like just playing a film on a rear projection, but that we were still using our Vicon system. So, here that we reconfigured where our cameras were located, so they were optimized for the position where the camera was, and there was a few little shots right in here. There he is. Okay, so here Ian's holding up the wand, and these things, and there it is laying on the floor. So it's just a black T-square shaped piece of plastic. It's like $1,000, $1,200 because there is some pretty high-speed calibrated electronics going in there. This particular wand it has several strobes that we're able to see the red light strobes, and that's what we would use to calibrate our floor cameras. But side by side with each one of those is an infrared strobe that is all firing in sync. There's an optical sensor on this that's picking up the strobing infrared lights off of every camera, and so it's strobing in synchronization with the cameras. And as Alex mentioned, the precise position of each one of these lights is known to the software. It's very carefully machined and positioned. So when that gets waved around the space, that gives us basically our map of where each camera is, and so that's an optical system.
Yeah, and there's a lot. Do you have any examples of other systems other than optical?
I do. Yes, let me see if I can. Fine.
So for those listening, there's optical, which is what the systems that Nick and I have used in the past, and those are probably the highest resolution. So optical is probably you're going to get the most quality. The problem really is that they are expensive. They take up a volume. They take a lot to calibrate and maintain. Then you have there's a variety of different ones, but we have active markers, and so motion analysis uses active markers. These blink at a certain rate. It makes it easier because they always know where they are. They always know which marker is which. They don't get swapped back and forth. Swapping is a big deal with some of our optical stuff. So that you have those, and then of course you have ones that are basically inertial, which are like X-Sense, and those are a lot less expensive. So the X-Sense, I think, how inexpensive do the X-Sense get? I think that some of them are less than $5,000.
Well, I think it's more like Rococo is down in that.
No, Rococo.
5 to 10,000 range. The X-Sense suits, I believe, are more in the 10 to 20 range. Okay. And then there's like Perception Neuron, which is definitely up closer to the 20K. And you get, and so an inertial suit is just like your smartwatch and your phone has an inertial measurement unit, an IMU in it, to track your steps and know what you're doing. And did you just fall? Are you okay? Those sensors are inside this mocap suit. And so there's a sensor at the shoulder. And so it's detecting where the shoulder is and where the elbow is. And that is how it's reconstructed. So instead of optical markers, what it's measuring is the trajectory of those IMUs through space. And specifically,
one of the things that I think is important is understanding what it's tracking, because we're not just tracking the body. We're tracking what we call rigid bodies. These are if your arm, this is, if we think about your body here like this, there are certain things that we consider rigid bodies, because if we put 3 markers here on an arm, that's a rigid. We're assuming that your upper arm is what we call a rigid body, which means that if these markers change in relationship to each other, that's why we can put them there, is because it's rigid. If they change in relationship to each other, we probably have to go to the hospital. so when we, we're like, whoa, that's no longer rigid. Let's so rigid bodies are things that we expect to, when we're putting these markers on, we expect 3 or 4 markers to always stay in the same relationship to each other. And that helps us because if this one gets occluded, these two still can be seen, and we can recalculate. We can make up where this one was, because we know how it was related to these other two that were moving. Same thing with your head. You put 5. Nick had talked about putting 5 on there. Those we assume that those will remain in the same relationship to each other, or the hat slipped or the person slipped. And then we have to go to the hospital again. So all of those markers there are there designed to define all those rigid bodies, so that we can figure out where the arms are and where the joints are, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, in optical markering, we would typically have 2 markers for anything that can bend, right? So your wrist is going to have a marker on either side of it in the traditional direction that it would bend. Your elbow, when we kind of teach that, you just imagine the pin that would go through the hinge, and you want to have a marker on either side of that pin. So that pin essentially doesn't move much relative to the elbow, but now we know where the elbow is. And then for the forearm, the upper arm, there would be 1 marker on that. And as a result, this forearm is actually 5 markers total, right? So there's 2 markers on the elbow, there's 2 markers on the wrist, and there's a mark on the forearm. And like Alex said, we're expecting some radial motion perhaps, but if these markers end up over here and the elbow is here and there's another marker, that's time for an emergency call. So the software expects that those things are going to stay rigidly oriented to one another, and then it'll say, all right, well, this is my pivot for the elbow, this is the pivot for the wrist, and in between is the forearm. And so that's how that kind of works. So I was showing the inertial suit, and again, the inertial suit is really measuring the trajectory instead of optical. Like, we don't know XYZ precisely where these reflective markers are. Instead, there's a calibration. You stand in that T pose where arms out straight and legs just a little bit apart. And that's kind of a calibration pose. And then from that point on, the various sensors that are inside the suit are being tracked in terms of their telemetry by a sense of the inertia, the forces that are being exerted on it, and you can kind of see a little bit of the trajectory of some various markers. These systems, by the way, are also available just as just the measurement units, and they'll have like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi in them, and they're kind of like wrist straps, so you could wear them under a costume in a live theater performance, for example. And that's, one of the kind of trade-offs is that an optical system, if it sees the marker, that's exactly where it is, period. There's no aggregation of motion over the duration of your shoot. The marker's there, the cameras see it, that's where it is. Whereas inertial sensors can have subtle, micro errors, and over time, those micro errors can add up. So that's kind of, the accuracy trade-off. But optical system, you have to have the cameras in place. They have to be positioned to see all the space, and you can't cover the markers with a costume or something, because then those cameras won't be able to track the position of the markers. Where you could actually wear a costume over an inertial suit, because the performance of the inertial sensors is going to be the same with or without that. And I guess another note about this particular actor, this is Eric Baer, where we did some character work, and he's wearing gloves, and those tend to be a separate system from the body. So I use Stretch Sense gloves. So it's a different product than the mocap system itself. There, let me just unplug these. So,
well, in a lot of cases, the hands and the face, right, are kind of on their own.
So there's usually the full body is one system, whether it's inertial or optical, and then the hands might be done with gloves that you wear. And the Stretch Sense gloves have basically capacitive, stretchy material within the fingers that they change, their resistance and capacitance changes depending on how much it's stretched. And so their software analyzes that in real time to decipher, how are each of these fingers bent. And it's it sounds simple, but they also have sensors horizontally in the fingers so that it can detect, as your fingers go out and in from one another, as well as the curling. And so these are really actually impressive pieces of technology. And then, Eric here is wearing we call it a head-mounted camera system, HMC, and it's a little lipstick camera mounted to a rigid bar that's he's wearing on his head.
And this was a newer one than the one I've used in the past. Is this new? Is this a new rig or is this?
This is a lighter weight. I forget what model this is specifically.
And this is still by the face capture.
This might. I can't remember if this is a faceware headgear or not. It might be one of their
way more comfortable.
Newer. Yeah, this one. Yeah, my faceware system is a little more like a bicycle safety helmet but you could see basically as he moves his head, that camera's view of his face never moves, right? So the position of really the bridge of his nose is locked into position in that field of view. And this will be recorded as video. And then the software we use from Faceware can track this in real time. So you could actually drive a CG character live, and it could interact and answer questions live and things like that if you wanted. And in this particular setting, we just recorded the video, and then that was analyzed in post-processing. So,
and now that we're getting the thing to pull together here is with Faceware, we could go in and do photogrammetry, take our own head and put it into MetaHuman, bring MetaHuman into Unreal, and then drive ourselves with ourselves.
Yes.
Yes. Very meta.
Well, I mean, that's exactly, where things are going towards in terms of being able to realize these visions of what, folks are calling the metaverse. But you can have a digital avatar that actually really does look like yourself. And that can be interactive and respond to your own face. And I think that the headset manufacturers are building newer models that have not only cameras in them to track, where the headset is in a room to enable the screen to work, but they actually also have cameras inside and out to see your face so that they could drive those avatars and be a facial capture system. So those are those core technologies. What's really interesting about this is that all of this becomes animation data, right? So we could make a character that looks nothing like him. We could make a character that looks like him. In this particular project, he actually played two roles. It was, two people in a car together having a conversation. And so, he's got this picture of the other character and he performed one role and then, switched to the little cue, this is for eye lines because we were tracking his eyes. So with the motion capture of the body and the motion capture of the face, this all stays synchronized when we play it back. But then it also becomes editable like video. And that's the other thing that I figured I'd have open if you wanted to talk about it. This is Motion Builder. This is when Alex talks about us having been doing motion capture work for some 15, 20 years. This software is what made it all possible.
Yeah. And it used to be called the thing on Twitter where it says show how old you are, how long you've been doing something without saying it, and you say I can remember when Motion Builder was Filmbox. And so Filmbox is what it was in the 90s, I think.
Yeah. So what happens here is I'm just showing specifically this particular editing mode called story mode. And it works exactly like a video editing timeline, except that instead of these blocks each being a video clip, and the X's are just indicating that there's a smooth crossfade going on, this is a motion capture take. So this is animation from my fellowship film when I was doing the movie with Epic. And I had this character that needed to kind of struggle up, and then she did a tuck and roll, and then she dodged an attack and picked up a sword and draws the sword. And I didn't have an actor to do all of those things, but I had libraries of motion capture that, there was getting up. Okay, I've got getting up, and then this little tuck and roll. And so this crossfades between two different motion capture clips. And then from here, there's a crossfade going to this kind of capoeira kind of a move. And when you're crossfading too, you can choose, well, which part of the body does this need to lock onto? So if we're coming out of this and the weight of the character here is really on the right foot, so this animation's right foot is going to get lined up with the right foot of that animation. And then the other thing that's happening here is this red character that we're looking at. And this is what, this has not been changed, this software, since really like 2005 or something like that.
It feels like they just keep it updating, working on modern whatever, but they don't do anything to it.
There's some minor improvements, but really this UI has not changed. This was what real-time graphics looked like back then. And it was revolutionary that you could play these animations, they could be in sync. And when James Cameron was making the first Avatar movie, they would use this tool on set to show the motion of, the alien characters and the creatures that were flying around, so that, that was kind of like the early version of what virtual production was.
Well, and Avatar really saved Motion Builder, I think. I think they were going to get rid of it. And then James Cameron was like, we need this. This is how we're using it, and this is what we'll do with it. So.
There are some things here that nobody else is doing. Like at this point, you can actually do this, this type of editing of motion capture just inside Unreal Engine. So you could bring in your Unreal Engine high fidelity character and drop in multiple animations and line them up and crossfade between them. All that is in there. But some of the things that Motion Builder also did well is you could choose which part of the body you wanted this animation to be driving. And so you could have not only a linear lineup of motion captures, but you could have stacked motion captures. And so, Alex did the voice performance and facial performance for one of the characters here. And so, his face was driving that character. And then I had a library animation of someone sitting in a chair talking on a phone. And I had another library animation of someone kind of pacing. And so those three different animations would get all stacked together to drive a single character. And so you maybe, face take 1 was better than body take 3, but body take 3 had a really cool little nuanced thing. And so you can mix and match all of that with your character. And so, this is a big part of the behind the scenes of motion capture, particularly when you're working with actors. A lot of times the reason you do motion capture is that you want a particular performer's nuances. If your character is going to be, ostensibly performed by Tom Hanks, you want to do motion capture with Tom Hanks so that his mannerisms kind of get.
And it's kind of amazing, that you can, as a human being, we can look over and see someone and identify who they are by just odd movement, of their body. And, you can see someone, you have to think about it sometimes. You can see someone 2 or 3 blocks away. There's no way that person is, your significant other or your, or someone a friend, but it's them, and it's something about and you don't even consciously know what that is. It's what we tend to call subconscious detail, like that you have this information in your head about you, like you it's somewhere back there, and motion capture takes advantage of that. It means that I can see that person and that mannerism and the way they hold their shoulders and their hips and everything else and the way they use their arms is something that subtly I understand that's them.
Yep. And the thing about working with professional actors is that they don't necessarily know what's going to happen to that data downstream and how that's going to get edited and ultimately applied. And so generally working with actors, there's a lot of this editing that goes on in the after, the post-production phase. On the flip side, though, because there are the inertial suits that are inexpensive, the cameras and the software for doing facial tracking is, very inexpensive today compared to what it used to be. All of these things, if you were a solo artist, you can, practice, and so that you perform something for the benefit of the motion capture system, and you know what your result is going to be. And so where a lot of times in the past, you would require an entire team of people to do the motion capture and to put everything together in the end, it is possible, and there are plenty of folks doing this today where they're solo artists and they do the performance and they do the mocap and they do the character work in Unreal Engine or something and produce content on a regular basis. And you're seeing that a little bit in a phenomenon called VTubers, where folks are leveraging varying levels of motion capture tools to drive digital characters that are now like talk show hosts kind of things. The deep, many artist production pipeline is still alive and well and used for most A-grade video games. And you're seeing individual performers, get themselves digitized and doing digital performances. Sony's been looking into this a lot and investing in this space for their, live concert scenarios and how can those be virtualized, particularly as we, have various ups and downs with pandemics and such. So
I still think it's hard to reproduce people when it comes to like concerts and stuff like that. I watch a lot of people do it, and I think that people come by as I think that they watch a virtual conference as a note, just something that's cool, but they don't watch it for very long because it's kind of, we still, the resolution we can capture someone's face, I think, is really still limited. The faceware stuff has come a long way, but even when you look at the best games that are, that do the highest quality facial capture, or you look at even what ILM does for Rogue One, it's not quite there. The face is so hard to reproduce. It is brutal to get to the level of detail that we can perceive as a human being, because our faces, what other people's faces are doing has been so important to our survival that it just, our brain is extremely attuned to that.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few examples of where that was done, very, very convincingly. And some even professionals didn't necessarily know that they were looking at a digital render, but that type of work to this day still requires a large team of very dedicated and talented artists.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where live motion capture becomes hard, because when you look at something like Gollum or you look at something like Avatar, those are not pure, animations that are coming out of that's not purely what it comes out of the system. There's a lot of, when Oscars are won by people who are doing motion capture, there's a lot of artists in the back end that are just rolling their eyes like, okay, well, where's our Oscar? We did a little of that too, so.
I mean, I think, I was one small cog in the large team that did the work on Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And, I was not on the animation team. I was more on the integration team. But that animation and the rendering work done then back in 2000, the production I think was like 2005 to 2009. It was a long production too. But I think I had my greatest satisfaction in all of that was seeing some of the digitally rendered scenes shown during for the award in best makeup, best achievement in makeup. Some of the shots that were shown during that were actually digital renders. Like that's not makeup, but that's okay. That's perfect. That's exactly, right. Then the job got done properly. Yeah. But another thing about video games is they've helped actually adjust where we call that the uncanny valley, right? Is where it just looks weird. Something's wrong, right? If you do it really well, nobody notices, and you're on the other side of the valley. That's the achievement. And if you don't go, like if you've got C-3PO, his face doesn't move, we accept that. That's perfectly fine. He's a robot, and so that's okay. But as you push closer and closer to that reality, you fall down into like, is this convincing? Am I comfortable with this? And I think the
and at the bottom of that valley
has gotten,
when you get into that valley in the bottom of it, you'll find Polar Express.
Exactly. There's definitely pieces that were done that were hoped to not end up that way. That like wanted to stay on one side or the other, that just fell into the uncanny valley. But
it's hard because what hit Polar Express was not that it wasn't good; it was that it was almost perfect. It was just a little short for where the technology could go at the time, and it just they swung really hard and missed. Yeah,
and like metahumans, 99.9% of what people are doing with metahumans today doesn't pass for as like that's a real person. The metahuman demo video is, to me, still the gold standard in terms of that animation, and it is animated. Like you could download that as a project file in Unreal Engine. You can look at the keyed animation and see all the work that went into like just doing neck swallows, and the neck moves as air moves through it. There's a lot of extra work being done that isn't captured by the camera systems. Our lips tend to stick together, and that's not captured. That's all stuff that needs to be added in. And so, a lot of what we see as metahuman work is like, okay, well, that doesn't look real, but it looks really cool. I think that with a lot of presence of video games, we're more accepting of the, it's not trying to be perfect. It's close enough that, wow, that looks really good. And people are more accepting of that.
I think that it also helps if you drop the quality of the character backwards. You can get away with a lot more when we stop thinking about it as a human or stop thinking about it there. We're willing to let it do all kinds of things after that. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill?
Our first one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, and Chris has a big link to IMDb there and says, scenes like this give people a taste of motion capture, but is it realistic enough?
Well, I mean, I think for a movie, this is from The Grudge or Grudge Match or something like that, but with Robert De Niro and Stallone, and they're wearing some motion capture that is somewhat absurd. So the markers are huge. You would never want markers that big because it would be very inaccurate. They'd be far away from the body. You want those markers as small as you think you can get away with them. And they're big and lit up. I mean, it's kind of like what a Hollywood producer's imagination of it is, and also it communicates back to there's no reason to be realistic for the audience. The audience will just suck this up because they've never seen motion capture, or they haven't seen it enough to know what they're looking at. And so the fact that these big bright lights on their characters and so on and so forth is, again, it is it's absurd, but it's they're kind of in the right place. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is definitely not a good marker setup. The size of the markers, of course,
the size, the placement, the number. Other than that, it's great.
Yeah, again, it's a comedy piece, and honestly, I do feel like there's a psychological study that's warranted. And incidentally, they are showing a motion builder right here on the screen. This is motion builder.
So they did at least some of it.
Yeah, I mean, they really brought up some actual software here. But there's something that happens to people when they put on the suit, because they are pretty silly. I mean, they're these black track suits with all these white little white dots. And the moment someone sees themselves moving on the screen and like they're able to control that. I mean, I have seen, professional dancers who all their lives, this is the most serious thing in their life. And as soon as they see themselves moving on that screen, they just go nuts. A literal Navy special ops operator just went like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
You just had a blast with it. So
Something about possessing
there's a little
another
bit
body.
of fun to be had with the suit makes you feel silly, and so I like that they kind of went over the top with that in terms of the like playing up on that, and so that's pretty cool. But in terms of a setup, this isn't far off from what you would see. You've got your characters. There's no need for green. Again, I think they're just kind of playing up on, well, green's a visual effects color.
Well, in fact, one of the problems really is that inside of a green, I'm sure that what they did, the green, because it's a dark room, the green read better, for film, it's just that they stuck out. They probably said, they probably had like a black, they brought the regular one and said, well, they're fading into the background. So they just put the green on to make that work, because green, as you said, is a visual effects color. The hardest part you get into with all the stuff around the curtains and everything else that we've done, at least, we put every cloth, everything. It's not just whether it looks black, it's what is its infrared signature, because sometimes things that look black come out as white. We've had like a Lycra oftentimes will come out white even if it's black. Because that's how the infrared sees it, not how we see it. And so when we order backgrounds, order floors, order all kinds of things for our motion capture, we actually take one of the cameras and we look through that camera onto those surfaces to know how is that surface going to actually look inside of infrared. And we've changed the way what kind of paints we use and what kind of whatever, all the objects and everything else, because otherwise what we want to do is create as much contrast between those markers and everything else around them as possible. Yep. Next question.
Next question comes from our own JJ McKenna in San Rafael, California. And he says, Tlaluk and I recently had the pleasure of building a DMX controlled set in Unreal. Have you seen a control panel in Unreal to control real world lights from within Unreal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's actually a downloadable example of that. And they've kind of made digital twins of stage setups. So the stage setup could be recreated inside Unreal with the same lighting instruments. And you can practice with the DMX commands. I guess I'm not entirely sure if you're asking, like, if you want a 3D model of a specific DMX board, that I guess I haven't seen.
No, I mean, I think it's mostly can we control the real control panel in Unreal to control real world lights from. I think that you would talk to.
I mean, that's absolutely possible. Yeah, that you can, and this is actually how a lot of virtual production sets are operated, because in addition to the back wall that might be an LED wall, where some higher end virtual production stages will have display screens as the ceiling and movable walls on the sides. Smaller productions might use DMX lighting in the rafters and on stands and such. And so if you're doing a driving scene and you want the light to play across the vehicle and past the characters, you've got the background screen going. You could use chase lights that are DMX lights and such. And there's actually a tool. The technique is called pixel mapping. So in the world, you can map that, okay, the light's coming through between these leaves, which pixel does that represent, and which DMX lighting instrument represents that pixel, and that one's on, and it's this color right now. So essentially, the DMX lighting system becomes a super low resolution LED display, but it has a lot more dynamic range than an LED display.
I mean, what's interesting is there's a lot of things that you build. There's a lot of things that you build into that you could build into Unreal that aren't, a DMX board is built around the constraints of I have to ship it, I have to have it be a certain level of density, I have to have it, all those things. In Unreal, you could have a lighting board that, like, you push a light and this thing pops open and you can grab on, you could have it in VR and be looking in your thing, and you could have these big handles and all kinds of other stuff that, I want to change the light this way. And you could redefine how those, how those controls work. inside of a VR system. I mean, so it's not. I don't think there's necessarily something that exists, but it's something that could be modeled and existing and be kind of fun. Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes to us from JJ McKenna again in San Rafael. He says, Disrupt AR has a Panasonic pan tilt zoom plugin for Unreal. Could this be used to track actor movements in a composite Unreal/real world set?
Nick?
The answer to that is yes. But,
well, I think that I think the PTZ plugin itself, though, is it actually tracking with the Panasonic PTZ, or is it just
well, that's just providing the connectivity so that you can send the PTZ hardware commands from Unreal, and so that you can specify where that camera is pointing. But built into Unreal Engine, you can have a subject of interest, an aim at target for an actual Unreal Engine camera, and so therefore that aim at could be the tracking marker. It could be a with hockey puck sized tracking marker. In fact, I think we were talking to a company about that a year or two ago.
Yep.
They were based on OptiTrack system. Yeah, BlackTrax. There we go. And interestingly, this actually the BlackTrax work actually dovetails with the DMX, because they were using active marker technology with OptiTrack cameras. So the OptiTrack cameras they were using didn't have the ring of lights around it. It was the hardware object that the talent had on them. It might be on their back, like a radio unit or something like that. But it was emitting the infrared light, and that was being tracked three-dimensionally through space. And then they would drive, DMX lighting that would move, so that you could intelligently drive the lighting system. So you could do a scene change and it'd be this dramatic stuff, and it would land exactly on wherever that person was standing on that stage. So therefore you could do the same kind of thing with Unreal Engine with this tracking and say, all right, well, here's my camera rotations for the Unreal Engine camera to look at that point that's being tracked by the mocap system. So pass that data on to the PTZ head so that the physical camera does that. And you just need to have some curves to map the floating point values so that everything performed in real world the way you expect it based on the virtual one.
And the big thing that the Panasonic 150s did was provide all that telemetry data back and forth. So they can be told what to do like a regular PTZ, but they can also say where they're at. And that integration between the two has been that was probably the best thing they did with that camera system was to make it to provide that really changed it. It became like the only all-in-one little PTZ that can do that. I have a feeling there'll be a lot more of them as we move forward. Is a lot more cameras that kind of have all that telemetry data that they can pass back and forth. Next question.
I think the big thing to know.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the big thing to know is that Unreal Engine is a software development platform. I mean, it tries to hide as much of that as possible from anyone who works with it as an artist and makes it as approachable and easy to use. But under the hood, on a PC, it's tied into Visual Studio. On the Mac, it's tied into Xcode. I mean, you can write C code and customize anything. And so inside that type of a world, numbers, it's just data. So numbers can come in from any type of source and they can go out to any type of source. Right. And that's going to allow all of these things to interface.
Next question.
Ranjan Chandil in Los Angeles, California says, would the slider built by Axibo, and he's got a link there, be a good option for motion capture and a smaller Unreal Vault with mocap?
It's a lot of that's going to depend on what type of data the Axibo actually can provide back. You could potentially calibrate this, but I'm not familiar with the product itself. A lot of these systems do have what are called closed loop systems, like Major Studio ILM grade motion control systems. Not only do you send them commands about where to go, but they're constantly reporting, this is where I am at. And that is important for the integration of something like a motion control system with what's happening in Unreal Engine.
I'm sorry, I didn't even know this product existed. It really looks cool.
It does,
especially for the price. The price is insanely low. It's in the less than 5,000 to do some pretty complicated things. So I'm definitely gonna do some more.
So they do
research on
have
that.
they note that it's Unreal Engine compatible. One of the nice things, you just shared this product to us, so this is really cool. I think Alex and I are both intrigued.
Somebody's going to get invited to a Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also in the film production industry, a lot of what would happen is the camera motion would be mapped out in a tool like Maya, and then that data would ultimately be converted for the physical motion control system. And so I wonder if this allows for that. But they're highlighting that it's compatible with Unreal Engine. I just don't know if it's sending "this is where I'm at" data to Unreal in real time, or if it's you can move a camera in Unreal and it would move the physical camera. But this is cool. I'm just going to keep this link off to the side for a while.
All right, next question.
Peter, looks like Belbin in Houston, Texas says, how often does the motion capture setup have to be stood up at a location for a specific job versus having talent come to the studio where the motion capture volume is already established? How long does it take to set up the volume at a new location?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, it's going to depend on the location and the extent of the number of cameras being used, what's going to be captured. So it's common, if you're going to do motion capture of animals, you go where the animal is typically. So, they'll set up motion capture in indoor locations for horses to run around. Incidentally, Vicon just released a new line of cameras yesterday, and they're IP65 certified. So they're certified to be used outside in at least a light rain. I forget exactly what the spec is for IP65, but the idea is that you could set those up outside. So, how many times do you need to go up and down? How high do you need to go? Are you doing that with ladders, or are you doing that with a bucket? Those are all going to be factors in that. But I can say that in our studio, if we're going to completely reconfigure, it can take a couple of hours. We have a little a staircase that's on wheels that, we just move it around like you might see it like a big box store to get the stuff up the top shelves. So there's a lot of running up and down and adjust the camera a little bit and that sort of thing. So if I'm going to do a cold setup at a new location, I usually want to book at least a full day in advance before talent gets there so that it could be set up and it could be tested and validated. And what else do we need to do? It not necessarily that it needs that entire day for the setup, but you want that runway in case something unexpected is encountered.
Yeah, we've always had at least a day to make that work, and those are for relatively simple shots. If you're doing something with a lot of cameras, then you usually want a week, to get it working. So, something as small as 15 or 20 cameras. We used to have this little USB camera system. So OptiTrack, the first version that came out, were these tiny little sensors. They didn't go very far, but we literally flew that to Arizona, Phoenix, actually, and just went to an exercise thing. We had to capture all these exercise movements, and we, put them all up on C-stands and did it. Now we had to calibrate it all the time because the C-stands, if someone bumped one, we had to redo the whole thing again. So it was kind of like a very careful kind of setup. But we were able to capture 250 motions at a very high resolution. We ignored, the big thing was we had to ignore back then the OptiTrack points, sensor, marker system and use Vicon. so that was the big thing that made it a lot better. But and then we built the system and brought everybody to us. So when we had 36 cameras, we definitely switched over because now we have a 30 by 40 foot volume that we're trying to kind of work inside of for people running and so on and so forth. We did a couple hundred 400 motions of exercise stuff. It works way better when you work from a studio than if you do it remotely. It's just, and this is the case for almost all production. Like we've been in this discussion about a bunch of other things, is that everybody starts, we always joke that, the difference, a studio is a farm and And, going out in the field is like hunting and gathering. And, everybody starts with hunting and gathering, but civilizations are built on farms. So eventually you move to studios when you want to do volume. So if you have one odd thing, it's fine. But otherwise, it's something you don't want to do very often. Next question.
When it is set up already in the studio, it could be 10 minutes really to set it up for one person, because everything's in place. You wave the wand around, you get that initial calibration, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and cost per day of production goes way down. All kinds of things. It's just way more efficient to be in a space. It almost always makes sense to bring people to you than to send somebody out. Next question
comes from Peter Belbin. But by the way, Alex, I have a hard out now, so I'll do one more. Nick, have you raised the bar? You have raised the bar again for panelists. How many will be adding a camera slider to their setup?
Yes, once we get one.
So I did a little cheat, though, is that I convinced the engineering college at my university to make creating a slider pan tilt head as a engineering senior project. So we just got this really big brand new one. So, but I'm keeping that link to the side. That still looks really intriguing.
Next question.
Okay.
Go ahead. You're taking Sky. Go ahead.
I was tossed
Yep.
Okay, what are those cool looking transparent projected computer monitors that Nick is using? What is that?
It's all virtual.
It's all virtual. It's Unreal Engine. So actually, I guess I can share the screen because you're seeing it. You're seeing the output of it. And this is what it looks like on screen in my computer. So this is what's being output of a Blackmagic DeckLink board in the computer. So it's a desktop PC. It's running Unreal Engine. In this case, I'm actually running an older version of Unreal Engine because I built this a couple of years ago and haven't gotten around to. A student built the environment for me, and then the screens they don't exist, of course, but I can get a little bit closer here with this camera. They are getting NDI video feeds from. One's getting a feed from the PC, one's getting a feed from my Mac that's got my connection to the call. And this started as a way that my camera is positioned in between my monitors. And when I would look at my Zoom call, it would look like I'm looking away from people. So now you can see that, hey, I'm looking at you. And there's Alex right there in the screen. So, but then I can also select the Unreal Engine cameras. I'm running an animation right now. So you might see that my camera feed is moving very subtly. The camera is just moving back and forth, and I can stop that animation so you can see a little bit more of the setup. So this is what's been going on all day, is that there's two cameras here, and they've been animating back and forth the whole time to get this little bit of a parallax going on. And these digital, these are 3D cameras in Unreal Engine, but they have an actual SDI output. And these buttons let me switch between which of these cameras is going to the SDI output. And that's how it is. And I have a YouTube channel called Pixel Prof that it literally tells you how to do all of this in Unreal.
That's great. Nick, thanks so much for spending a little time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's always good to see you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, really, really good. And again, for folks on Wednesdays, we'll be talking about graphics. Sometimes it'll be 2D graphics, sometimes 3D graphics, sometimes visual effects, sometimes AR, VR. But we're going to keep on coming back to these things because as to have a total understanding of what we're doing, because you're going to find that you're going to wish that you understood, maybe not how to do it immediately, but at least how to talk about it and know that it exists out there, I think is important for our members. Even if you're mostly doing video and audio and Zoom and other things, it's important to understand how these other things work. So you can go, oh, I can incorporate that in, and I know, who to call and at least what to ask for. So we're going to keep on doing these on Wednesdays. So stay tuned. We might use that slider that just got announced. We might bring them on and talk about their Unreal integration. That looks pretty cool. So we'll see how that goes as well. Thanks to the producers for all the great questions, and thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. And thanks to all of the folks on the back end that made all of this work, make it work every single day, 7 days a week. Really great work. And now a reminder Ken Jordan will be here in the right after this. So he's going to be talking about web development. So stay tuned for that. And we're going to jump into after hours and see Ken. All right, here we go.
Great job, Nick. Good to see you, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good seeing you. I will. I don't know if anyone's near Vancouver. I'm going to be in Vancouver second week of August for
Guy's
SIGA
right
conference.
next door.
Yeah,
Right,
he's
yeah.
like across the pond or something like that.
Right down the street.